So, did you hear about the dyslexic devil worshiper who sold his soul to Santa? So, we're going to talk about the soul today. And what most people's idea of the soul is comes from a major part of the Christian tradition. But actually, this idea doesn't originate with the Christian tradition. It comes from ancient Greece, from the Platonic tradition, and this is the idea that we all have a soul, but that the soul is trapped in the body. And being in the body with the body's needs, with the body's instincts, imperils the soul. It imprisons the soul. It's not good news for the soul that we have a body, and if we play our cards right, our souls will be liberated one day into some kind of a blissful state. In the thinking of many, including the Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker, this idea that the soul is imprisoned by a corrupt body is where sexism begins in our civilization. And if that's too subtle for you right now, you should read some of the early church fathers, because they say it right out loud, that because women have to do with bodies, bringing new bodies into the world, feeding bodies, washing bodies, taking care of bodies, cooking, curing the sick, washing the dead, that women and the corruptness of the flesh are one and the same. And we may have given up this idea, but it still affects our way of looking at the world. So it's kind of evil, actually, if you think about it. This whole idea of the soul being imprisoned in the body is a really bad idea. We need to look at it. And it leads, in some versions of the Christian story then, the idea that there has to be some kind of an act of righteousness or suffering to liberate our souls. So Jesus had to die, had to be murdered, had to be put to death, so that his spirit could be resurrected, his body could be resurrected, and triumph over the evil of the flesh. Well, it also led to this whole idea of original sin, that while we're in a body, that we're hopeless, that we need divine intervention to save us. The liberal religious tradition has another idea about humanity. The liberal religious tradition affirms that human beings are capable, creative, responsible, and powerful. And this is major good news. If we live it, if we believe it. You know, this idea, which does come from Platonism, from ancient Greece, wasn't the early Christian thinking at all. In fact, it's not even the official doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. The early understanding is that when the judgment came, that there would be the resurrection of the body, not a soul separate from the body. And this comes from the old Hebrew idea of, the Hebrew word is nephesh, and this means the totality of the human being. It's often translated into soul, but it really means the totality of the person. Body, spirit, thoughts, minds, energy, unconscious, all of it is the soul. We don't have a soul. We are a soul. In other more contemplative parts of the Christian tradition, the soul is the place where our own individual lives and the life of the divine, that ever-creative energy out of which we come, mingles, comes together. And if we pay attention to our souls, then we are aligning ourselves with that creative energy, that we are becoming attuned to God in that traditional language. The soul is that little-known part of ourselves that's beyond our self-concept, but is really ours. Because Unitarian Universalists have affirmed human beings as good, creative, responsible, and powerful, many of us have rejected any concept of the soul or any need for one, especially a soul that survives our physical death. But all of us at times do need a source of healing and grace outside of ourselves. We can't do this alone. We can't live alone. We're not meant to. There are times when life hands us a burden too great to bear, a loss too great to encompass, a fear too great for us to handle alone. And we need to look then outside of ourselves for help. So what then do we do when we can't be or don't want to be good, creative, capable, and responsible for a moment? When things just seem to be too much for us? Well, we can look for the resources and the strength of the soul. The soul, yeah. I like what Rebecca Parker says about the soul. She defines it in a completely different and refreshing way. The home of the soul is the earth, is the world. It's not above the world. It is the earth. It is our bodies. It is this life. That's where the home of the soul is. You may not know this because maybe some of you don't read modern theology in its 3-volume systematic forms. But modern theology does take modern science into account for its metaphors of the ultimate. And one of those metaphors is about the hologram. So in case you don't know what a hologram is, say there's a hologram of a person. You might see this at Disneyland or some other kind of entertainment center. A hologram of a person. So this projection looks like a real person because it's three-dimensional. That's pretty marvelous in itself, but that's not the most marvelous thing about a hologram. The thing about a hologram is you can take a holographic plate and shatter it into many pieces. If you do that, unlike a regular slide, say you only have the one piece, you project through that one piece of the whole plate, and you don't get, say, just the foot of the person or the head of the person, as you might expect. You get an image, a three-dimensional image of the whole person. Now that blows my mind. What Parker says is that we are the hologram of the whole universe. We are the hologram of the whole universe. We are the interaction of 1,000,000 forces coming together. Yes, we have the freedom to choose and to create, but we are ultimately connected. To be is to draw the whole universe together into one knowing, seeing, and acting point. So the soul that we have in this world, in this life, is connected to everything that is, and we experience it. We are a point at which the whole universe, and if you want to, you can say God is experiencing itself. That does not mean that the soul can't be endangered. It can, not by the world. As the old story says, the soul is not endangered by the world. It's endangered by the loss of the world. It's endangered by alienation from the world and the life that we are given, by pulling back from our existence, by numbing ourselves to the intensity of being in this life, in this body. That's what endangers the soul. And there are many ways this can happen. The dangers and temptations are there. A grief or loss that is not felt and experienced. Alcohol and drugs are really great ways to damage the soul. Not living or taking care of or paying attention to our bodies can damage the soul. Being caught in a dull, boring, numbing routine and feeling trapped by it can damage the soul. What staves and restores the soul? It isn't the death of someone on a cross many years ago. What saves and restores the soul is every time we keep our feet on the ground. Every time we notice, enjoy, and live in the world and inhabit the life we've been given in all its joys and sorrows. The world saves us by abiding. On a beautiful spring day, if we experience it wholly, we touch the soul. When we're struck speechless by a sky full of stars, when our hearts are melted by the smile of someone we love. Every time we have an experience that says, with joy, I'm here, I'm alive. The soul is saved when we inhabit all of ourselves. In his book, Care of the Soul, Thomas More says that storytelling is an excellent way of caring for the soul. And I believe that's true. When Lyle Grunkenmeyer came back from World War II to a small town in Iowa where he grew up, he wasn't the same happy, carefree, mischievous young man who left. He didn't speak. He just sat in a rocking chair in his family's parlor, said nothing, barely ate. People didn't know about traumatic stress disorder then, shell shock, or how to deal with it. So he just sat there. But his sister Maxine took care of him. She didn't know what to do either, but what she did was she just spent every moment that she could with him, talking to him, bringing him back to the details of life. She told him that the wind had come up and blown all the sheets into the cornfield. She told him about the church potluck. She described every single dish that was at the church potluck and who brought it. She told him every single dress that every young woman at that potluck wore. She told him all the gossip that she heard at the church potluck. We don't do that here, but anyway. And when she ran out of things to tell him, she just sat there. You know, sometimes she would be knitting, and she did this day after day. Then one evening, the tears started to flow down Lyle's frozen face. And Maxine came to him and embraced him, and he started to talk. He talked about the long marches. He talked about the cold and the snow. He talked about his buddies being blown up next to him. He talked about when he marched into a camp. He talked about the sights and the smells and the emaciated human beings in the mass graves. He wept and sobbed and talked until dawn. And he was done talking. Maxine got up and made breakfast for the two of them. They ate together in silence. And Lyle went out and did the morning chores. Telling our stories can heal the soul. And that's one thing a religious community can do in our small group ministry. That's what we try to do and often do well in wisdom circles and in other small group opportunities. Parker Palmer, who's a Quaker theologian, says, "The soul is a shy animal. In order to come out, it needs to feel safe." And in our small groups, we try to create an environment where people can tell their stories without fear of judgment or advice or change or conversion, to let those stories come. To let people grieve what needs to be grieved in their lives, to let people describe the way they have suffered, to realize that no one can make it alone. In other words, love. Love. It's a form of prayer. It's a conscious awareness of our interdependence with others and the universe. It's one of the things that religious communities do best. It helps us to realize that we need others and we need to be faithful to our deepest selves. Parker says, the purpose of the church is to deepen aliveness. It's about the evocation of suffering and the evocation of grace. She writes in Choose to Bless the World, to have soul is to hear life's deep music and to move in response to its pulse, rhythm, and harmony. To have soul is to live with a sensitive awareness of the real presence of other human beings and the earth. It is turning your hand to the work of justice and compassion, your mind to the call of wisdom, your heart to decisions for life. It is making your whole being an act of praise. Amen and blessed be.